the kolos u'bohakim, with sounds and with thunder and lightning, with shofar gadol, and the sound of the shofar blowing and getting strong. It was the voice of the 10 Commandments heard round the world that we read in today's Seder. The Torah, my friends, is not merely a scroll found in the Ark, nor a set of printed books, but is a living faith within the Jews. Our sages of old bolstered this notion by pointing out that the total number of mitzvot, commandments that our Torah recites us not to do, totals 613. There are 248 mitzvot aseh, 248 commandments that our Torah tells us we are commanded to do, like giving of charity, honoring of the father and mother, going to synagogue, observing the Sabbath. 248 commandments that are affirmative commandments. And our sages tell us that it's equal to the number of limbs in the human body. And there are 365 commandments which one should not do. Thou shalt not tell a lie. You shall not steal. You shall not murder, etc., which are comparable to the number of days in the year. 365, totaling 613 Taryag mitzvahs. These we are taught, and through this we are taught that our Torah wants all of us, wants our minds, our hearts, our souls, our mouths, our hands, all our limbs, and it wants it of us all 365 days of the year, all the time. Judaism, my friends, is much more than a way of life or a view of life. It is life itself in its totality. There is a story that I read not too long ago, that in a little village in Europe, before the Nazis overran that community, the Jews looked out of the window one evening and noticed the rabbi walking with 2 coffins, rabbi and a committee. And they ran out to see who was it that died, that being buried in the evening. And when they came out, the rabbi explained, in these coffins is not a body, but we know the Nazis will be here in a day or two. They're on their way. And when they get here, they will burn our synagogues, as we have heard, and destroy our Torahs. So in these coffins are our Torahs, and we are going to bury them. And I pray, said the rabbi, that the day may come that the Torah will be disinterred and will be returned to a synagogue ark. With this, my friends, as an introduction, and ironically on the very Shabbos that we read of the giving of the first Torah, that David has received this week a Torah that was indeed saved in this very manner. The Torah was written in year 1880 on the city of Rakova, and the Germans, when they were going to take care of the Jewish solution, set up a museum in Prague, Czechoslovakia. In that city of Prague, there was already a Jewish museum in existence. And so they thought they will take all these museum of curiosities, and send it there. Among those curios was this Torah that we have received this week. When the services are over, and as you leave the synagogue, on the table outside will be the very crate and the Torah still in it. It is rather interesting and curious enough to see the way it was shipped here from London, England, and shipped to London, England from Czechoslovakia. Don't hesitate to look at the Torah and at the crate when services will be over. And now, my friends, I shall sermonize. Generally speaking, our Sedra, though it contains within it the Decalogue and the entire story of Revelation of Mount Sinai, doesn't begin with this very happening. In fact, it's only part of the Sedra. The main part, to be sure, the theme of the Sedra indeed is the giving of the Torah and the revelation of God. But nevertheless, it's only a part. The Sedra begins with a story. the story that Moses' father-in-law Jethro, astounded to hear what had happened to Israel in Egypt, went out to meet this emancipator. Jethro, Moses' father-in-law. And by the way, today his descendants are the Assyrians, or what we call the Samaritans, or quite often in Israel is a tribe called the Druze, who literally are part of the Israeli as well in their armies. These people claim are the descendants of Jethro, Moses' father-in-law. Not the Assyrians, I meant the Samaritans. Now what happened when he came to meet Moses? They met in the wilderness of Sinai. And our Torah describes this dramatic scene. Moses went out to greet his father-in-law. He bowed down, he kissed him, and each asked after the other's welfare. Implicit, my friends, in this description is a most profound understanding of the levels of human confrontation. In stage one, we bow down. We greet, we smile. With how many people do we have the nodding acquaintances? In elevators, in the office buildings, we may even call out a saccharine good morning or a cheery good night. There is, however, no real engagement of personality. They just bow down to each other, greet, smile. But at times there's a second kind of confrontation. We nudge into a second stage. We get closer to other human beings. We embrace them. We shake their hands. We kiss them. If the occasion is on a simcha or a social gathering, a chasana, a bar mitzvah, we become kissing cousins to the same people who before you would have only said hello to. But our Torah emphasizes the most significant level of our encounter. And each asked after the other's welfare. The most significant confrontation we should have is when we concern ourselves about the other man's peace and well-being. This is the test of real involvement and genuine interest. We live in a world, my friends, where many of us are content with the first two levels of greetings. And I read this phrase of urban life that I read a few weeks ago. A great author describes what urban life is like. People tend to live extremely crowded, but internally lonely, morally isolated lives. We each know more people, but fewer persons. There is a story that was told on a TV program I will never forget. The story is told of two close friends that worked for 10 years together at a bench. And one was transferred to another job in another community. And when a few other friends came to him to tell him how sorry they were that he was losing a friend that was with him all these years so close to him, he said, "We weren't friends, only acquaintances." And the other people asked him, "Only acquaintances? For 10 years you were sitting together. You laughed together. You had so many good times together. You worked together. You spoke together. You went out together." And for a moment the man pondered, and he said, "But we never cried together." When Moses saw Jethro, our rabbis tell us, he inquired first of the peace and welfare of Jethro, then proclaimed to tell him of the wonders of God. And our sages tell us, great is peace and welfare of your friend and neighbor. It precedes our praises of God. How delicate is this insight of Jewish ethics. We must concern ourselves with the welfare of man first, before we proceed to proclaim the greatness of God. This is the meaning of the very opening story of today's session. And now, my friends, I feel I'd be remiss tonight if I do not sermonize We begin now with the month proclaimed in America as Brotherhood Month. Of course, the month of February, Brotherhood Month. Now, as I look through the Ten Commandments, my friends, I want you to think about this, see if it is not true. Certainly it is. If I look through the Ten Commandments, I find that there is one commandment that is irrelevant in our day. If we would take it out today and only make 9 commandments, it would be perfect. For instance, the first commandment, I am the Lord your God. It is needed even today. We find many people don't believe in God. They're atheists. Don't believe in God. The second commandment, or the third commandment, thou shalt not bear false witness, or in a sense, thou shalt not swear falsely. This is also needed. Another commandment, observe the Sabbath. Certainly this is needed. The commandment, honor thy father and thy mother. We've got to remind ourselves of that every once in a while. It is needed. And all the other is needed. Not to kill, not to commit adultery, not to want, and so on. But the second commandment, which reads, thou shalt not make any graven images, is a commandment which is absolute today. Does anyone go ahead and make a second and graven image and call this a God today in our modern society? To the people who the Ten Commandments were given? We're not talking about those in the jungles and that. No, it seems to be absolute. But now, my friends, it is not easy, and it is not an easy thing to accept an idea or to commit oneself to a great purpose. We cannot be polite and respectable when we talk about great ideals. When Jeremiah chose truth, he was compelled to say of himself, I am a man of strife and contention. We cannot affirm truth and then withdraw. We cannot affirm something that we believe in and then not fight for it in a negative sense. In every affirmation there lies a denial. And unless the denial is firm and eloquent and vigorous, then the affirmation is pale and colorless. Everybody is for peace, but too many nations in our day, and we see it for us, are not willing to give up the things they cannot have without war. In our national and international life, we find that while we profess a great ideal, we do not deny its opposite. In our Torah, the belief in God is immediately followed by the rejection of other gods, of all idols. We cannot have both. And it took the Jewish people a long time to learn this lesson. For prophet after prophet called to our people, you cannot serve idols and the God of Abraham and Isaac and Jacob. If we are for honesty, we must reject dishonesty. If we are for a synagogue, we must reject your pettiness within yourself. If we cannot have a code that we wish, then don't profess the code that you say you're going to have. There's no such thing as being one way in your personal life and another way in your business life. There is no such thing as being one way in the street and another way in the synagogue. I plead with you today not to regard this second commandment as absolute. It is not obsolete. As we dedicate ourselves to affirmation, to peace, to brotherhood, to justice, to truth, to faith, to Judaism, to the equality of man, let us simultaneously dedicate ourselves to our denials. We are against war. We are against the man who turns brother against brother. We are against the gossipers. We are against those who find something wrong and whisper it to another. We are against injustice. We are against falsehood. We are against those who do not have faith in their God. We are against those who are ashamed of their Judaism. We are against those who believe there are people who are second-rate citizens or second-rate to that God has created. As we said before, great is peace it precedes our praise of God. We must concern ourselves with the welfare of man before we proceed to proclaim the greatness of God.
Shabbos Parshas Tzitzaveh. In this week's Torah Sedra, we read of the making of the Holy Ark. I think we all have a picture in our minds of the Ark with the cherubim of gold on the cover and its wings touching each other. The Ark itself was made out of wood and then plated with gold, mibayis u'michutz.
Why did the inside of the ark need to be inlaid with gold as the outside? It was never opened, and it would never be seen. And the answer given by our sages in the Talmud is, and it is written in our Hershel if we open it up and just see the beauty of the words. It is gold within and without, to teach us that man must be as pure in mind and heart as he appears outward in his manner and bearing. Let one be inwardly what he pretends to be outwardly. My dear friends, is this not the clarion call of our youth today? They are rebelling against hypocrisy of our society. Is this not what our youth are yelling all about? For honesty inside. They are clamoring for truth that they do not see in their elders. They are saying, why don't you act what you profess and study and learn to be? Is this not what our Torah tells us the Holy Ark must be? I just returned from a USY convention, and I see a few of them here that were there then. Our Alan, who made the Kiddush, a few others. And I've seen how our young indeed are concerned. They are concerned with justice. They are not indifferent to the plight of the human, be he Jew or non-Jew. They sat through their seminars on the Jew in America, on the problems of the Negro in America, on the situation of Israel and Arabs, on the situation of the Jew in Russia. They sat through with enthusiasm, and they listened and questioned and argued and were concerned. They want inner truth to manifest itself in our outside action. I once asked a class, what's the definition of the word truth? I even looked into the dictionary, unless it was just a small college dictionary. They gave me the answer in a negative manner. What is truth? What is truth? Define the word truth for me. The dictionary says truth is the absence of falsehood, a negative answer. But our Talmud gives the answer so beautifully. Truth? Pi v'lev shovim. That your heart and your mouth are saying the same. That your heart and your feelings are the same. Be it night and you feel it is day, and you say it is day, to you are saying the truth. The Talmud asks this question. We say that the majority rules, or we say the majority in any case of justice. What the majority has chosen, so should be the justice. How do you know, because the majority said this, that this is truth, that they are right? Maybe not. The answer is that God, whose word is emes, whose word is truth, said if they feel in their hearts that what they say is truth, what we profess we are from within, show it from without. But now, my friends, our Torah does not say, Kaho Ketocho. It reads, let the inside be as the outside. It doesn't say that the outside should be as the inside. You know, everyone, young and old, have an outer beauty. We can see this with the fact that an artist paints, and we can see this in sculptors who make their statues. It is beautiful. No matter who he is, there is a beauty in the outside. in our physical outside. And at the same time, my friends, the inside of a person is rather repugnant. I don't think it's so beautiful. Rather repugnant in its beauty. And my friends, as is this psychological, the truth as well. Just like the physical is repugnant from within, so is the psychological makeup of man repugnant. Psychiatrists say that the inner wishes of man is that of the animal and sometimes even worse. Man is beastly within. He is lustful. He is animal-like. He is hateful. There's jealousy. There's desirous. There's wanton action. In short, he is an ego. As part of his psychological makeup, all he cares is his ego. We find our Torah says this. After God brought on the flood, and God then said, I am sorry that I destroyed mankind, he uses the expression, the will of man is evil from the moment of birth. And our Talmud explains that to me, not that he's an evil person. It means that he has the animal within him, the desires and the wants. Within inside our psychological makeup, and there's no use kidding ourselves, there's animal. And we live in a society today, however, that this hidden and perhaps natural inside of man's craving, of man's psyche, is brought out in the open to all of us to see. Our movie depicts in full horizontal detail the inner animal and the passions of man's desire. We see on our TV, in living color, death and sex desires and nudity and hatred and passions, all that is the natural instinct of the inner of man, of the animal of man. But it's there for all to see. It's out in the open. Today, in fact, we even debunk all heroes. We celebrate the birthday of Washington. Washington's birthday. And I read in a magazine that was supplied to me by my barber, because only my barber would supply it to me. It is called Playboy. And in that magazine was an article about Washington. And the article writes that Washington was asked whether he wants to have a salary or whether he wants to have an expense account. And he chose an expense account. Unfortunately, he had very good taste. And his expense account was rather elaborate. And later, when the war was over, and he was elected the president, he came again to the government and said, gentlemen, don't give me a salary, give me an expense account. And they said, no, we would rather give you a salary. But the way the article wrote this up was literally debunking the father of our nation. And so on. I think we all read articles of this kind, of this nature. There are times, my friends, that our outside should not gloriously be exhibited, what we feel. Rather, work towards the goal of making your inside passions as pretty as the outside should be, and as the outside should display. And I turn to religious life as well. The synagogue today, and it's no use kidding ourselves, and our young know it, the synagogue, the inside of the synagogue, doesn't reflect the truth as it should be without. Our young know this, and our young is concerned. They know that the synagogue seems to be more concerned with card games and with luncheon parties than with the Chevra Mishnayos. And I think everybody of you here knows what a Chevra Mishnayos. They're concerned more with these outside activities than giving charity of Achnos HaSochim. They're more concerned with that than with the daily minyan. They're with helping the plight of our own elderly who seek companionship and friendship and a place to come. So the young say, we'll not go to synagogue. What for? It's not relevant, and our parents show us that it's not relevant. And don't think they don't sense it. They do, and they know it. I therefore plead to the young, who at this moment perhaps are not sensing that it's so relevant to synagogue, and to all the old, let us work to make Toko Kebuho Zahav, the inside of the synagogue, and its meaning to the outside world, make it both of gold. And as the Ark of the Covenant held the symbol of our faith, so is today the synagogue the symbol of our faith. Let the inside be of gold, and the outside will then radiate of gold. Let our outside actions reflect the inside of what a synagogue really should be. And let the inside synagogue actions reflect what we wish to give forth to the outside. Then will the cherubim, then will these angels that are depicted on top of the ark, the angels of children's faces looking up and touching each other. And our Midrash says children's faces looking up to teach us that they are looking to higher things, to greater goals. Then this will certainly be a true symbol. And the Ark of our Torah today will have purpose in our education, in our synagogue, and among our own personal lives, and in the society we live in, and in the society we would like our children and our grandchildren to grow up in. We continue.
Shabbos, Parshas Ki Sisa. And our text reads in this week's Sedra, Moses did not know that a radiance of light shined forth from his face. After receiving the Torah, Moses came down from Mount Sinai, and this glow of radiance was upon him.
I think we all know the famous statue of Michelangelo with Moses with horns, for the expression of our Torah that a beams of light radiated from his face, and of course the conception they had were horns. And then again the halo that we always find around the heads of the saints in the Christian faith, again symbolic of the radiance of light from this particular verse. Some of the greatest advances, my friends, in science are being made in the exploration of the human mind. It's been discovered, for instance, that beneath the surface of our conduct, there is in each one of us subterranean streams of motives. We all have a heritage of emotion, of drive, of impulse, indeed, the gradations of man's development, from the primitive, the savage, the primeval, to the unrefined, to our present day. Our Torah, in describing Moses, speaks of another kind of subconscious. This is the subconscious of an unawareness that comes from modesty. Moses came down to his people with a radiance of light that all who looked upon him saw. Only one person among the entire multitude was unaware of that radiance coming from him. And that person was Moses himself. Moses was unaware of his great influence, unaware of the illumination he was bringing. And how beautiful do our sages say, man learn a lesson from Moses. Our sages teach that many ordinary individuals are unaware that every man, however humble his station, however limited his attainments, casts a light. There is no human being without influence. There is no man whose light does not have some effect upon the life around him, even though he may not recognize this fact himself. How often are we called upon to assume some responsibilities, and we counter with that famous phrase, "Why me? I'm not important. I'm a simple person. I have no standing. I can't do it." In fact, Moses himself countered to God when he was asked to lead his people from Egypt. "Don't send me. I'm a stutterer. I'm nothing." But my friends, each and every one of you do cast a light. You do make an impact. You do exert an enduring effect. Hillel said it. We are taught in ethics of our fathers in Ein Ani Li Mili. If I am not for myself, then who am I? But he goes on, Shani La'asmi Mani. If I am only for myself, if I do not realize that I can do for others, Mani, what am I? And this holds true also in family life. Students of psychology tell us the most important influence exerted upon children by the parents is not the so-called conscious man-to-man talk, the lesson that is above and beyond anything subconscious, but the things that we do casually, the things that we consider not important at all. It's the unawareness in your family life. It's the unconscious word dropped from our lips that remains with our children. I think all of us still remember words and sayings of our parents and our grandparents that was casually spoken only 30 or 40 years ago. How often, oh yes, I recall my mother used to say this idiom. My grandmother always used to use this expression. Each one words of wisdom and of purpose. Look to the casual, to things that parents say and do when they are unaware. Then you will find the real force that shapes the spirit and the minds of children. And I go a bit further, my friends. This is true in community life as well. If we come across pamphlets or we come across newspapers that seem not to be to our liking, it is because newspaper men dig their noses to what the people want. If we have newspapers that are insensitive to human values, they take their position on the side of reaction. If we read articles that do not respond with understanding of community needs, if we read papers or articles or periodicals that show that they are opposed to every new project, to every new idea, to every new enterprise that may enrich common life, if we have such papers and we read such things, it is because we have such readers. And the humble do not realize his influence that he can shift. And I turn a little further. In Judaism as well, there is a soul to our faith. And when I ask the question, where is the soul of our faith? Where is it? My friends, it is in the lives of humble people about whom no books will be written. We do not figure in headlines. It's among people who do not stand out as heads of large movements, whose names are relatively obscure and unknown. These are the people who determine the quality of Jewish life. The everyday people. If they are the people who are concerned, then they breed leaders who are concerned. If they are the people who want Jewish education, Jewish needs, synagogue attendance, everything that is Jewish in life, they breed the leader that will give it to them, the teacher that will inspire to them. They breed the will and the desire that just grows me from strength to strength. If we wish to have in our generation a Hillel, and a Kiva, a Reb Shimon ben Gamliel, great towering figures, then there must be thousands of little Akivas in our society to produce one great deathless one. Moses was wrong, says our Bible. Moses did not know that he radiated, and we who are ordinary mortals also forget that our faces send forth light and streams of wholesome impact. But my friends, we learn yet another emphatic lesson. You know, the Hebrew language is known for its fierceness and beauty of expression. Now, in the entire Bible, there are only two places where the terminology of "he did not know" is used. One was our text that we have just read. And there's one other place in the entire Bible. In a story that is age-old and famous, and every child knows it. There was once a great Jewish leader who was very strong. I think we all know his name. Samson. Samson was a leader, a holy man. He was a judge among his people, a strong man. He made one mistake. He got married. And we all know this story. Eventually, Delilah tricked him into telling her the secret of his strength, and she gave him a haircut. And when he was brought to the pagan palaces of Dagon, and when he was made jest of, he thought still he had his strength, and he was about to break his bonds. Our Bible uses the expression that he could not do it, for he did not know that the Lord had left him. Paradoxically, only twice the expressions he did not know. Moses did not know the heights of spiritual glamour he had reached, and Samson did not know the depths to which he had fallen. This is the great tragedy of life today. We are ignorant of our powers, and at the same time, quite often, not aware of our failings. And this, my friends, is true not only to individuals, to us. It is true to governments. It is true in a sociological sense as well. The Western mind just does not know, for instance, the mind of the Arab. They cannot comprehend that according to the Arab faith, as an example in their Quran, to tell a lie is permitted. To lie is permitted as long as you get the ends to your good. They cannot understand that the Arab mind would kill man, woman, and children, would put a plane in the bomb, would bomb anything, just to say, there, it flies to Tel Aviv, and I will show that we will take some revenge. Perhaps they just cannot understand it until it's too late. And the Israelis were yelling, the Israelis were calling this, the Israeli was making this clarion call. The Arab mind lives that way until they will be educated otherwise. And this is not Rabbi Brooks, but this is a sociologist, one of the old Arab sociologists that writes this. My dear friends, not only in government, but as individuals, it is quite a paradox. You know, I've come across quite often, we hear the expression of a certain cigarette that advertises. And he says, it's what's up front that counts. I forgot the name of the cigarette, but what's up front that counts. And unfortunately, there are many persons who apply that slogan to the way they live and the way they work. Too often it's just up front. Up front is where the impression and the shows are made. And those are that what counts, and those are the kind of persons they are. They may have an immaculate lawn, They had gleaming cars, stylish clothes, and a house with a clean, attractive facade. In other words, everything that meets the eye and makes the impression is perfect. But inside, chaos, pettiness, sloth, misery, all this may reign, all hidden, of course, from the neighbor's eye. One does not know. They may appear in synagogue, or they may appear in other functions. They show up in society pages regularly and have their names in the list of the civic organizations, yet their inner lives are faithless, antisocial, and self-centered. In their work, they may be flashy and impressive, making big promises and getting big contracts, wielding their influence wherever they can. Yet they follow through is very little. We all have seen such persons. We all know their slogan. It's what's up front that counts. And in our relationship to one another, do we really know one another? Do we really care for each other? Do we really understand ourselves? I end with a beautiful poem that was written by Edward Arlington Robinson, a Pulitzer Prize winner. And he says, I call this poem a failure to know the truth. Strange that I did not know him then, that friend of mine. I did not show him then one friendly sign. I would have rid the earth of him once in my pride. I never knew the worth of him until he died. To hide our heads and ignore these sociological tendencies would be sheer folly. It's here. It's the it thing of the day. It's being groovy to partake. And for the first time indeed, many of the above is hitting home to us as Jews. In a Jewish manner, and it becomes a Jewish problem. Because we too as Jews get involved and must be involved. It hit home to me as a rabbi, and to many of you as lay leaders just recently. To give you the Jewish answer is important. There is a religious answer. There must be some sort of religious law for these rights or wrongs, and how I, as a rabbi, am to preach towards some of these problems, and indeed, what position I should take in my sermons, and what position I should take in my own life. And believe me, my friends, there is a Jewish answer. And there is a Jewish way, and a Jewish halakha, a Jewish law. And in history, there is proof of how I am to advise you and how we ought to act. It's just unfortunate that so many of our young people out there feel that religion doesn't belong. And sometimes I feel too that religion has fallen away. I feel sometimes religion's like a candle that lights a room, and the room is small, and there's enough light to light the whole room. And suddenly the room begins to expand, and before you know it, the light is there, but it isn't enough to give as much light as it was. This is what I think is happening today in man's condition. Technologically, our world has expanded, and our universe has grown so fast that we are having trouble to expand the morals and the norms and the ethical living of our society of old to light up this expanding world. But take my word for it, there is Jewish answers. And I will just give you tonight but a few examples. As an example, the population explosion and abortion. There is Jewish law to guide us. We are taught in our Torah, Peru, Urevu, be fruitful and multiply. This is the very first commandment, not only to animals, but to human beings, to have children. But yet our Talmud says there are times when you should not have a child. When are these times? And our Talmud says, Omar Rabbi Akiva says to his students who just got married, remember, do not have children in a time of famine, in a time of danger, and in a time of an exodus wandering. You should not bring forth children on the world. Population explosion stopped. And they asked him, how do you know this? And he says, listen, very simple. Joseph in Egypt. I think we all recall the story of Joseph in Egypt. There was a time of famine, 7 years of famine and 7 years of plenty. How many children did Joseph have? Jacob had 12 children. Reuben had 14. His brothers had 7. The other one had 13 and 4. 70 children went in there. 12 and 70 great-grandchildren. Not great-grandchildren, 70 grandchildren from 12. So they were very prolific. Yet Joseph only had 2, Ephraim and Manasseh. The only 2. You think Joseph could have had more? From here we are to learn, because Joseph lived in Egypt. He got married after 5 years of plenty, and he had 2 children, and the times of famine started. So our Talmud says, from here we learn, when there's a time of famine in the land, when there's hunger in the land, do not bear children. In a time of danger, the Maccabees proclaimed, now that we are in war, revolution, do not have children till we are at peace. In a time of exile, we know the story again. The Talmud says Noah went into the ark, and Noah went into the ark with his 3 sons and their wives. And they didn't begin having children till the ark rested, and then a few years later the first child was born. And our Talmud says that during the entire time they were in the ark, in a dangerous exile, moving from place to place, they were not to cohabit. Let's look at the problem of abortion. Certainly we believe that life is precious. And as Jews we believe, however, that there are times that the living is more precious than that which is not here yet. We don't observe, as do the Catholics, that the mother is to be killed. The mother is not to live and save the infant child. We don't believe that. Yet, on the same token, our Talmud gives us some particular laws of abortion. Some laws, when they say, abort this child, do not bring it on the world. And they say this, and I understand some states accepted this exactly. In questions of health, whether it be a problem of a health for the mother or health for the child, if a child would be born abnormal and they knew it, perhaps they didn't really know it, the child could have been normal, but if they thought so, one may abort. In a time of shame, if there's shame going to be brought upon and you can't abort, do it. In a time of a mental attitude where, God forbid, suppose a woman becomes pregnant and we know that her husband is already separated and a divorce will be coming about in 1 or 2 months. Or if a woman suddenly becomes a little bit deranged, there says our Talmud, you may also have. But the Talmud says, God forbid, as I have read in a magazine just a few weeks ago, to have an abortion because you think you cannot support another child, this, says our Talmud, is a sin shehava. It's a sin as if you have taken life. Because the one who gives life will also give food for that who comes upon life. This is no excuse. In fact, there are rabbinic committees meeting in many states that sit as a committee to judge whether or not this problem of a woman coming before them as an abortion is a Jewish way or not. I will take, in fact, smoking. We are taught, and some rabbis are already preaching against smoking, simply because we are taught the law of Shmartem es nafshosechem. If the law is given to us that is danger to your life, and you must protect your life, and if they say it is unhealthy, then it's a religious law of the Jew that one should not smoke. There is just too much to elaborate on each one of these subjects, my friends. And to explain how your rabbi feels about them in just one sermon is impossible. But with God's help, I hope to elaborate on each of them and to see how it is. There's a story told, indeed, of a pilot of a ship. And the pilot was taking this ship through some treacherous waters in the Mississippi River. And a passenger on the ship turned to him and said, "You must know where every single shore and rock and sandbar of this whole coast." And the pilot looked back at him and said, "No, I don't. Not by a long way." And then the other fellow says, "You mean to tell me that you don't know where all these things are?" He says, "No." He says, "Then how could you get by?" He says, "All I do is I know where the deep water is." We don't know every particular law that may come. But the Jewish way is to know where great problems may exist and work it out. Tonight, my friends, I wish to discuss the subject of protest. Protest. This means a protest march was brought down the Jewish throats just a few weeks ago with the visit of our French president, George Pompidou. Very nice president. Now, what should our attitude be in general towards marching, towards protest, and specifically, what should our attitude be when, as Jews, we march as Jews for a Jewish cause, trying to relay our Jewish wishes? Can I, as a rabbi, for instance, advise on the public platform to go march? Can I, as a religious leader, partake in a march which I feel is just, be it Jewish cause or not? Are we as Jews right or wrong in protesting and marching on the Russian embassy and on the United Nations coming April 19th in New York to let the Russian Jews leave that land for the land of Israel? Is this small group known as the Jewish League or the Jewish Defensive League a shame to us, or are they right? Or they're righteous to us? And again, to answer these questions, my friends, I begin by looking back to our history. The first incident of protest is written in history. Don't think it isn't. We have it in our Bible. It is written that when Moses went to Pharaoh, and Moses said, "Let my people go," first protest, Moses didn't go himself, but he went in Ziknei Israel. He went with a group of Jews, marched to Pharaoh, "I want you to free them." But we read further in our Bible, when they were freed by Yukla Yisrael, suddenly the Jews gathered on Moses, "Give us water." We read further in the desert, the Jews came to Moses and protested and marched, "Give us food." And then when Moses was on Mount Sinai, when he came down, he suddenly saw a golden calf. Well, the Jews all gathered together and protested with signs, "We don't want this God, the golden calf is our God." When Moses sent the spies to Israel, and they returned, again there was a big mob riot, saying unto Moses, "The land is a land that eats its inhabitants." And that's when Moses and the Jews were punished to live only 40 years in the desert and then died. And it all ended with a man named Korah, who literally brought a mob before Moses and demanded Moses' resignation. He wants to take over as a leader. So, my friends, certainly, and it's obvious, that protests existed, but it seems most of them were it was unjust, it was rebellion, it was considered sinful rather than helpful. But at the same token, we look a little further in history. We find that King David became king because the people of Israel all rose up and marched to Jerusalem, proclaiming him king, not Saul's son. And then we read that King David's son Absalom, in a protest march, revolted against David. And we read again that the kingdom split because of protest. But we also read that the Maccabees got all the Jews together in a new spirit because they protested again. In short, if we look at our early history of our people, we find that there was rebellion and protest. It was taken to the streets. For whatever it was worth, it was considered unproper and un-Jewish, ungodly for an Am HaKodesh, for holy people. But on the other hand, it also accomplished. Ha'am midabrim, say our prophets, the people have spoken. And this is the way they were able to voice their objections and their delight. And I turn to halacha, the law. And this is quite interesting. We have a Jewish law that says, Dina de Malchusa Dina, the law of the land must be obeyed. If I drive my car at 50 miles an hour when it says 35-mile-an-hour speed upstairs in heaven, God has given me a check that I did something wrong according to the Jewish law. Not according to the state of North Carolina. Jewish law. Of course, you are commanded to follow the law of the land. But the very same place says also, Hilchos HaMalchus, if the law or government decrees something against the Torah, even against something that is religiously in the Torah, you do not obey. Suppose the government of the United States would say, no Jew is allowed to eat kosher. We are commanded that we do not have to obey. Why? Because everything in our Torah is just. And if a government gives a decree against our Torah, it must be an unjust decree. It must be discriminating against the people, and therefore it is unjust. And we are not commanded to follow an unjust law. But now the question is, are we to sit passively and not follow this unjust law? Or are we to go out and defend and actively change this law? Again, our Talmud says, we are taught in our Torah, justice shall you pursue. Why did I have to say the word pursue? Could have said justice shall you follow. Why pursue? And so our Talmud teaches us that you are to go out and actively pursue justice to change unjustice. Now the Jew until recent years never really had the opportunity to actively oppose, actively dissent an evil decree, or to march, or to protest, or to be heard. Who knows? If in Germany 30 years ago, if the Jews did not get together and march and protest and show their banners and unite against something, whether that would have never been. Thank God we are blessed that we live in a land of America, that we can voice our opinion, but always keeping in mind that we are in a free and democratic land. Pompidou, French president, not only was he refused to sell the jets to Israel, but he's selling 120 jets to Libya, who don't have that many pilots. And Libya, the government openly said that all Arabs should cut off the oil flow to the west for the Arab cause. These people, France, are selling jets, saying that they need it. It is good for France. We will become a power. This was Pompidou. This is what he represented when he went into this land of America. He's not representing the French people or the French people in the street, but the French government. This is his policy. What he's saying in a roundabout way was, let Israel either commit politicide or suicide, and if they cannot, then the others will let them commit genocide. Certainly he was a guest here in the United States, but where else can he see the feelings of the Jewish people? In France, the Jews would not march against their president, like we here in America should not go out and march against Nixon, saying in 30 days he will let Israel know whether he will give them jets, and we have a feeling that he has decided not to give them. I think that came over the news today, the feeling of it. Certainly in the United States we will march against Nixon, Like in France, they won't march against Pompidou. We can have meetings against Nixon. We can send telegrams. We can talk our campaigns. This we can, but we don't march. Where else can we make ourselves heard other than that a French president came here on these shores? Mind you, all in a fashionable, orderly, respectable manner. And to protest was not against the French people, this is important, but against Pompidou and his policy. What's more, it was not organized by radicals in the street. It was not organized by irresponsible people. But these marches were organized by responsible, brilliant Jewish leaders. Dr. Wexler of the Bnei B'rith is no child. Rabbi Tenenbaum of the United Jewish Congress is no fool. Rabbi Hershel of the seminary is no rabble-rouser. Certainly, and this we must say certainly, as Moses, when he first went to Pharaoh, didn't know whether he's making it worse or better for the Jews. And in fact, he made it worse at the beginning. They came running to Moses, why did you come? You made it worse for us. We don't know if it did any good or hurt the cause. We do know that President Nixon went and kowtowed. For whatever reason, he had a kowtow to the president of France, so that when he comes there, we can have a nicer cocktail, perhaps. But I think it certainly didn't hurt. And the mayors of New York and Chicago and San Francisco and all the rest of them allowed this protest because for whatever idea of this dissent, they also felt it had an important instance. Sometimes I think the American policy of the State Department is like that story of the Helena. There's a story told of the wise people of Helena. That there was a curve going very badly around near that city. And every time a horse or wagon went on that curve, it would turn over and someone was hurt. So they had a meeting. And they thought, how could we do or what should we do about this terrible curve? And accidents always occur. Well, after the meeting, they decided that they would build a hospital over there right near the curve. That's the way they would prevent it. I feel sometimes the United States also, instead of seeing the truth and putting their hand down and saying, this is this, like Kennedy did in Cuba, like we found that the Russians back out quite often, they seem to just build a hospital. Power talks, more power talks, and more power talks for naught. Kowtow. My friends, it is time that the Jew be not ashamed to espouse his feelings, to be publicly part of the presence and the pursuance of justice. All justice. As long as he still understands that this pursuance of justice is not to be done at the cost of destroying the justice and the rights of others also. There was protest for morality among Jews all the time, for righteousness, for law throughout our history. And I make one distinction in protest in our modern time. This distinction is whether it is called taking to the streets or whether it is called talking to the people. To march, as we did on Pompidou, it was talking to the people. As many of them do in the bomb scares and in the streets of Chicago or in the streets of Baltimore now, this is taking to the streets. This is wrong. And so any protest nowadays, search your own conscience well. Search it well. What's the purpose? What's the method? What would be the end result? And before you move, remember, is it also a Jewish thing to do? If you feel so, then go and do it. If you don't, then sit home and do nothing.
Shabbos, Parshas Vayikra, Tafshin Lamed, Erev Purim, 1970.
Tonight's sermon I will divide into three parts. First, I begin by explaining some of the oddities of this holiday of Purim. The word Purim is a Persian word meaning lots.
This was by God set the day to destroy the Jews was finished, that day being the 14th day of the month Adar. This very day was made into a day of joy, being given its name, that Persian word, by the way this was chosen. Second, the reading of the Torah on the Shabbos before Purim is a story about Amalek, who first came to fight the Jews as they left the land of Egypt. Haman was a descendant of Amalek, and Mordecai a descendant of King Saul. And just as King Saul 1,000 years before was the man who was battling the tribe of Amalek, so now individually Mordecai and Haman. The fast of Esther was originated by the rabbis about 1,000 years after the very first Purim occurred. The name Hadassah, the organization that we have today of Hadassah, was organized on Purim in year 1912. Indeed, the name of Hadassah is another name for Queen Esther, and so this name was given to the organization. The Megillah is regarded as a letter sent from Mordecai to all the Jews, not as a scroll. And therefore, as the Megillah is read, it is not just rolled out of the scroll, but folded back and forth as one would read a letter. God's name is not at all mentioned in the entire Megillah. And our ledger says, because the happenings and occurrences of this particular episode was no miracle of God, it was a new, normal, human, natural occurrence, though an unseen miracle indeed it was. The longest verse in the Bible is in the Megillah. In English translation, it contains 90 words, one verse. In the Hebrew, it contains 45 words. It is in chapter 8, verse 9. On Purim, one makes a Purim Sudah, a meal, which indeed is Sunday evening. And among the traditional Jews, they have a challah which is round, just like the challahs used for Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. Symbolic of what our Talmud teaches us, Purim Yom Kippurim, that the holiday of Purim is just like the holiday of Yom Kippur, if it is celebrated with the true intent of what it could be, your sins will be forgiven. We know what the Hamantashen is. Some call it Haman's hat, others Haman's pockets, others Haman's ears. But our Talmud tells us the reason why the Hamantash has 3 corners is symbolic of the 3 main heroes in the story, Mordecai, Esther, and of course the evil Haman. Now my friends, although Purim is a minor festival in the Jewish calendar, it emphasizes many major ideas. Through the figure of Mordecai, Purim teaches that the Jew is never to bow in obedience to any power other than to God, as Mordecai refused to bow to Haman, and what Haman represented. Yet, he must remain loyal and faithful to the land in which he dwells. Wasn't it Mordecai in the story of Purim who told Esther of the plot to kill the king? Wasn't it Mordecai who later became the vice king? Was it Mordecai who advised how to collect the taxes and how to make the wealth of the Persian Empire? One has to be loyal to the land they live in. Through the person of Esther, Purim teaches us that heinous sin of a Jew not to be involved in ensuring the future of the Jewish people. Esther wasn't involved at first. She didn't even know that there was a decree to kill the Jews until she heard of Mordecai walking around in sackcloth. When she heard that, that's when she realized what her purpose is as a Jewish woman, and fasted and went to give of her own life to save her people. Now, my friends, the holiday is observed by 2 distinct actions. One is reading the Megillah and merrymaking. The second one, which is also on the Purim, has fallen into virtual disuse. And that is what the Megillah commands. Shalach manas Israel. I wonder if anyone ever heard the expression Shalach manas. Shalach manas means sending of gifts of food, one man to the other, also part of the celebration of food. And our rabbis tell us this is done because of the verse that Haman used in the Megillah. To use the verse, there is a certain people scattered and dispersed. And so Shalach Manas, the sending of gifts, is here to show that we are united. United not only in times of distress when we are threatened, but even in times of joy. When Purim is already here, when Haman has already been hung, that's when Mordechai send gifts of food to each other and give presents to the poor to show that we are still united. I think that this custom should be returned to the Jewish people, of sending your neighbor on Purim a box of candy, or sending your neighbor just a few fruits, some food showing that you are concerned of Shalach Manas. It's clear. And now the second part of my story. The Shabbos is known as Shabbos of Remembrance, Shabbos Nochos. Why do we call it Sabbath of Remembrance? Because we read in our Torah the command to remember that once there was a tribe Amalek, and the tribe Amalek came as soon as the Jews crossed the Red Sea. Immediately, back to war with them. In fact, my friends, there are a lot of prayers and commandments in our Torah and Talmud to remember. And it seems they are continuously reminding us and reminding ourselves of tragedies, of misfortunes that played throughout the Jewish history. I ask the question, why harp on these tragedies? Why not impress our children and ourselves and our neighbors of good, of blessings, which have indeed occurred in our history? Continuous self-pity is a negative contribution to man and to heaven. But my friends, these type of critics miss the point. All the zachars, all the remembrance that we are commanded that we have, is not to remember the incident that occurred or the tragedy of the moment, but rather the lesson to us and to mankind that the incident represents. Here in America, we have such things. Remember the Alamo. Remember the Alamo is not here to teach us to remember to hate the Mexicans, but rather the heroes that the Alamo produced. Remember Pearl Harbor is not to teach us to hate the Japanese, but to remember the heroes of the Pearl Harbor and the fight and the guts that the American soldiers had. Remember the Maine is not to remind ourselves of the Spanish War or what happened in Cuba, but those heroes that were on that ship. And so it is in our Torah. To remember Amalek is to remember that they represented a powerful group who wanted to destroy a weak people. Remember our exodus of Egypt is not because we should hate Egypt, but to remember the joy of freedom and what it means when one leaves of slavery. Remember the days of old. Understand what your grandfather has taught. It's not to remember terrible things, but the sweetness, the nostalgia, the beauty of those days that have gone by. But we have on Pesach, when we make this little sandwich, and we say, let us remember how Hillel made the sandwich with bitter herbs in the middle, with myrrh and 2 matzahs. It's there to remember that once there was a temple, and once there were people who were concerned, once there were people who thought the beauty of Judaism is to put it together. And so on. Even the expression, Zecher Yom HaShabbos L'Chato, remember the day of Sabbath and keep it holy. Remember, my son, the words of your father, and do not forget the teachings of your mother. All memories of old will see clearly the way for the new. And my third part of this sermon. My friends, there is unfortunately a theory, often repeated and expressed, that needs examination on this holiday of Purim. And the theory goes like this. In the long run, and in the final analysis, anti-Semitism has been the force that has preserved the Jewish people. Its pressures induced in the Jew the will to resist
persist and endure as a Jew. And there has been no such pressure, had there been no segregation, no persecution, no wearing of the badge, the Jew would have long since lost all Jewish awareness and quickly vanished. The Jew's sense of his own identity has largely been a reaction, not an original positive form. And they bring Purim as proof. In fact, doesn't the song that the children end with the words, "And don't forget, we owe him the jolly feast of Purim." In Israel, in fact, there's an old joke that goes around, and it says one ought to erect a statue of British Prime Minister Ernest Bevin, because if Bevin had agreed in 1947 to President Truman's proposal to admit 100,000 Jews to Israel, the Jews would have gladly accepted them, and the situation would have been closed. And his stubborn refusal brought the case to the United Nations, and eventually the State of Israel emerged. So if Bevin had not been a pig-headed anti-Semite, there might have never have been a State of Israel. More seriously, but still, not too dissimilarly, there are many who argued if not for the Holocaust in Germany, there would never have been a state of Israel. And the argument can be summed up in the ancient proverb, Lo me'avas Mordechai ela misinat Haman. It is not for the love of Mordechai, the love of the Jews, but for the hate of those wicked, or for the pity that they have done. What gives this theory, my friend, of truth is the undoubted fact that external stress and pressure so deepen self-awareness and sharpen self-identity. Normally, for example, a man becomes aware of his concern for his health only when he is threatened with disease. And the same thing they say is with the Jew. But let's continue this analogy. Let's continue it for a moment. Whether he will overcome or succumb to his diseases depends upon both his physical resources and skill of his physician. A stiff push may make a man walk faster, even run. But to do so, the man has to have legs, and he has to have lungs, and he has to have something to walk with. The people's culture and religion that have vanished in the course of human history simply had neither resources nor skill. They didn't have the imagination or the will to respond and meet the challenge that confronted them. It was, for example, the fact that Judaism was a universal religious concern in a homeland that preserved the Jews even when they were away from the homeland. They took a portable homeland called the Talmud with them. They took a synagogue with them. And so when the temple was in existence, then later destroyed, the Jew lived. In other words, my friends, the way to combat a negative force is by being better informed, devoted Jews, proud Jews, committed Jews. This is what made us, not the fact that others punish. The Amidah, the prayer that we say in the Amidah, contains but one paragraph that refers to our slanderous enemies, and that's only a relatively new prayer. The other 18 brachos, the other 18 blessings, speak of the blessing of the richness of our Jewish faith. It is only on Purim that the Jew permits himself to say, "Cursed be Haman." Every other day of the year, the Jew begins his day with prayer, and his opening paragraph reads, "Ashreinu ma tov chelkeinu, ma noam goholenu, ma yafeu shafteinu." Happy are we, how good is our portion, how pleasant our lot, how beautiful our inheritance. We continue our services on page 37. Let us rise, Aleinu Shabbat.